Today I want to talk to you about one of the most profound, relevant, and life-changing experience that I used to heal from decades of narcissistic abuse I had been living through, as well as the years of extreme parental alienation that I went through, designed by my ex and his family and my own father and his wife. As most of you know, my ex kept me in family court for over 15 years. The unending harassment, false allegations, and accusation, years of unwarranted calls to Child Protective Services filled with bold-faced lies that I was a child abuser and basically a criminal. Then the worst thing that I never dreamed could happen to someone like my child and I. My son was kidnapped out of my home while I was sleeping, and my car was destroyed. They had crossed state lines before I woke up, and because of that, the police told me that I had to go back to the state my ex-husband lived in to fight him in family court there, because the state we lived in did not have jurisdiction, because I never had the divorce decree and the parenting plan put into the system in South Carolina, which is where my son and I had been living for over a decade. I had no idea I was supposed to do that, but evidently I did, and the police and state police did absolutely nothing. My son and I were living in South Carolina, and my ex lived in Missouri, so I had to come up with the money to get back to Missouri, hire an attorney, and yet again fight this deranged monster in court. By the time I got to my son and got a court order to have him removed from his father's house and placed back in my custody, which took roughly 3 months, my son had been severely alienated from me and had been indoctrinated with horrific lies about me that he absolutely believed. He was returned to me a child I no longer recognized, which of course was traumatizing at a level I did not know existed. I say all this to try and convey the depths of the trauma and despair that manifested in my own life, and I know so many of you are going through this as well. And for a long time, I got stuck in the trauma of what happened. Ruminations about the trauma dominated my life for years, and it got so bad that it felt as though my body was shutting down. And I finally realized if I did not do something different to help myself and pick myself back up, that this was likely going to kill me. That is how bad it felt. And I do believe that would have actually happened had I not done what I am going to explain to you in this video, in hopes that it will help those of you out there that are in this situation right now. If you are new to this channel, I'd like to take a moment and welcome you and invite you to please subscribe and be sure and hit that notification bell, because I put out new videos every week. Also, if you are interested in private one-on-one narcissistic abuse recovery coaching with me, please visit my website. It's linked in the description below. So, how I got unstuck in the trauma. This may not be something that works for everyone at all different stages there are, but I hope that you will keep an open mind, because for me, this is at the core of how I finally healed, moved on, and turned my life around in every single sense of the word. Also, I want to note that my son and I are stronger than we have ever been. He knows what truly happened, and our love for each other will never be vulnerable for something like this to happen again. I realized that I had to change my perception of what happened and the narrative that I was telling myself. I realized as long as I continued to view myself as a victim, however, the first step in healing is sincerely validating the truth that I was a victim, that I was preyed upon by very disordered, deranged, personality disordered individuals, that realization and understanding was critical. However, I got stuck in victimhood and in the injustice, in the wanting revenge, in the trying to seek justice from anyone in authority, to no avail. I had to realize no one was going to come and help me. Most people in my life didn't truly even believe what I was saying because it was so outrageous. Unless someone has lived through it, they just do not understand, and therefore they will doubt that the victim is telling the truth. So knowing all of this, I decided to implement a completely different perspective of what had happened that ended up uncovering the deep-seated wounds from my childhood that I likely never would have explored had I not gone through this. Those wounds had to be revealed, explored, and healed if I was going to get better. I stopped believing that what happened to me was a punishment or deserved, but rather a challenge from the universe to find healing and understanding in all that I had been through. And the goal was for me to find my purpose for what I had lived through. I found the meaning in my suffering, which was that this had happened to me not because I was bad or defective or crazy, as the narcissists in my life tried for years to convince me of, but rather it was because I needed a wake-up call. I needed to once and for all acknowledge and heal the wounds from my childhood. Had this not happened, I likely never would have recognized that I had deep traumatic wounds from my childhood that were in need of attention, care, and to be healed in order for me to live the life and the purpose that God, my higher power, or the universe, however you look at it, intended me to have. It forced me to acknowledge and accept the truth, which is that I am deserving of unconditional love, forgiveness, and happiness as much as anyone else in the world is. Severe narcissistic abuse is so soul-crushing and devastating that it knocks a person so far down in the dirt that it forces us to realize if we are going to survive, if anything is going to change, and if I am ever going to be happy, which, by the way, is a choice. Being happy comes from within and is an absolute choice. I am the only one who is going to save me. No one else is coming. It's just me, myself, and I. And that was a pivotal moment for me. I had hit rock bottom, so to speak. I had lost every single thing I owned trying to protect my son in family court, and my father and my ex-husband and his family had successfully, severely alienated me from my only child. I had reached the point of something called radical acceptance of what had truly happened to my life that no amount of denial or cognitive dissonance could hide. I had to stop and finally say, this is either going to kill me or I have to figure out a way to rebuild my life. A life not like before, but a life that I deserved and the life that had my purpose, and a life where something like this could never ever happen again. I finally realized I could not help or save my son until I helped and saved myself in every sense of the word. Trying to help and repair the damage done to my son and the indoctrination he had gone through, and to repair and rebuild the absolute intentional destruction of our relationship would not have been possible or effective if I did not change my perspective and my beliefs about myself and what the trauma represented. I would have been unable to heal my son and repair the intentional destruction of our relationship. Right or wrong, good or bad, fair or unfair, this happened. There was nothing I could do to change what happened, and I had to accept that fact and understand that I was only contributing to the further alienation of my son because I was severely traumatized, and my behavior and attitude was only further alienating my son. And I was actually behaving the way the narcissist had brainwashed my son into believing about me and the smear campaign that they launched against me. They had essentially told everyone that I was crazy and mentally ill. And that's exactly, ironically enough, what I looked like. It was designed for me to look like that. So I had to decide. I had to make a choice to do whatever I must do in order to get my authentic son back. Unfortunately, at that time, I did not have enough self-love to find this type of strength, but I did have that kind of love for my child. So I used any and every possible thing I could use as motivation to change my life. And it started with my perceptions and beliefs about myself and what happened to me. So how did I do this? First and foremost, I stopped the nasty and abusive inner dialogue going on in my head. I took a hard look at the way I was talking to myself and what, if anything, needed to change. And when I finally made a conscious effort to be aware and analyze my internal dialogue, I was shocked. I was talking to myself no different than the way my dad and my ex-husband had talked to me. I had internalized that voice and was abusing myself with my own inner dialogue all day, every day. I wouldn't talk to anyone ever the way I was talking to myself. So number one, that had to go and had to be replaced by a voice that was encouraging, supportive, forgiving, and empathetic. Normal people who are happy do not abuse themselves in their mind. People who haven't been exposed to severe mental abuse don't do that. So I stopped doing it. And every single time I caught myself doing that, I stopped it. I fought back and I replaced it with a loving and supportive inner dialogue. I had come to the conclusion that all people are creatures of the divine who deserved unconditional love, support, and encouragement, including myself. Before this happened, I did not know that. And I had been abusing myself in my own mind for years. Next, I realized because I too was a creature or a manifestation of God, as is everyone else, I had the power that I had been just giving away to the abuse and the abusers. And I made the choice to take my power back. I made a decision, which was I was going to refuse to allow these things to go on for one more day, not one more single moment. And I started loving myself the way I always was deserving of, but just didn't know it. So I started unconditionally loving myself, no different really than the unconditional love I had for my son. I, as does everyone, deserves to be unconditionally loved, and by God, I was going to start doing it. I realized that the voice in my head was not my own. It was my abuser's, and it was a pathological liar, and its job was to destroy my life if I let it. And finally, I realized because the narcissists in my life were unable to feel empathy for anyone, I had been indoctrinated to believe I was undeserving of empathy as well. Not only that, but in a certain respect, I had a hard time empathizing with my son and what he went through. I just couldn't believe he actually believed these things, and eventually started participating in the smear campaign. And I had to realize he was more of a victim than I was. He had been betrayed and lied to by people in his life that he had been taught to trust and respect. So the empathy I started feeling for myself transitioned into feeling empathy for my son as well, which is the key to helping an alienated child heal. I even started to feel empathy for my abusers. However, that does not under any circumstances mean I condoned what they did, nor would I ever let them back into my life in any capacity. But I did manage to start feeling empathy for them. What a miserable, superficial, and horrible existence and life they must have. I realized and made the choice to believe that they have a severe and permanent personality and character disorder that no one would want to develop. And I decided that what they had subjected me to was not personal. They would have and will treat anyone like they treated me given the opportunity. The names they called me were truly projections of how they feel about themselves deep down, and I decided to forgive them and pray for them. Now again, this does not under any circumstances mean that I believed they were not guilty or that they didn't deserve to face severe consequences for what they had done. And forgiveness is a very personal decision that each victim must decide for themselves if it's a necessary component to their healing. But I did decide it was necessary for my healing. And in doing these things, I healed myself. I rebuilt a beautiful relationship with my son by letting go of the injustice and radically accepting what had happened, and to accept the fact that I will never be the mother, the sister, the daughter, or the friend that this did not happen to. And I decided to learn from it and heal all the abuse I had been exposed to my entire life, and face the hurt and pain so that it stopped the progression and the direction my life was going. And most importantly, doing all of those things led me to what I believe is my true purpose and reason why I'm on this earth, which is to help others who are going through this and try to expose this form of abuse and contribute to educating societies everywhere that this form of abuse exists, and people need to be aware and protect themselves from going through something so tragic as my son and I had lived through. And in the helping and service to others, I realized it was just as healing for me as it was for the person I was trying to help. So in closing, if you are living through this and struggling to get over it, please reach out for help from a professional who understands this, either an educated therapist or a narcissistic abuse recovery coach like myself, or a support group with others who have lived through the same nightmare that is narcissistic abuse and parental alienation. No one should have to go through something like this alone.